Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, we'll be reviewing the Club Sport Handbrake version 1.5 from the guys at Fanatec. This handbrake has been in production for quite a while now, and there are many sim racers using them with great success. What do you get with a handbrake for $130? Time to put it through the SRG's review process and see. So, let's get to it. Now let's take a closer look at this Fanatec handbrake. This is version 1.5, which is their latest shipping handbrake for the Club Sport line. And yeah, there's a lot of these units out there. A lot of people are using this handbrake and having a good time with it. So it definitely works. As far as durability, I haven't heard too much about it, that part of it, but it has a good tension to it when you first pull on it. Although I'm going to be flipping this around. I want mine to be straight up and down, but they ship it in this configuration for some reason. Maybe because of the shape of the box is easier to ship. I don't know. But yeah, $130 shifter plus shipping. A lot of people are using this. I haven't heard too much as far as durability or issues with this particular unit. And we're going to find out more about it, obviously, as we go along through our review. The casing here is a stamped metal. We have one piece that goes from this side here. You can see little edges there. And it wraps around the top and the back side where we have our little input. And then we have another U piece shaped here that wraps around the other way. So we have two pieces of stamped metal here. This is some kind of a matte finish on here, some kind of a paint I'm imagining that has a, again, kind of a pebbly, very small pebbly feel to it. Nice matte. It's not a fingerprint magnet, which I really like. Although the stainless handle is going to be a different story because stainless steel always, the oils in your hand can cause it to. I've already got some on there, actually, if you can see in the lights there. But that's the stainless steel in general. I like that they are using a one-piece stainless steel lever here. This is going all the way through the handle. You can see the end of it, which is very nice, just like a proper chef knife. So you've got full support of the metal shank through the handle. Very nice. Looks like some kind of a plastic round piece here on either side of it. The grip is in kind of an open cell foam. You can get a closer look at that. It feels pretty good. And I like the way they've cut this out so it kind of fits your hand when you're pulling on it. So yeah, when you first grab it, it feels pretty good. I like that. Anything else we want to talk about here? The fitment on this, well, you know, you got to maintain certain expectation levels when you look at this. And there is a little gappage here and there. You can see that we got some here. And there's some indentation going on in the metal on the top. I think you can see that in the lights. Somebody may have got a little too aggressive at the factory when they were assembling it and pushed the screws down a bit more than they needed to be, because they actually have pictures on their website. You don't see that. It's nice and flat. So yeah, this stainless steel bit here, I like it, but it doesn't have a very good finish on the edge here. This edge is pretty sharp. It reminds me of the metal that you find underneath an automobile or truck or whatever, the dashboard, the supports underneath that metal frame that they put in there. A lot of times, obviously, they don't finish it off, so it's very sharp under there. And if you've ever tried to run wires for anything, stereo or whatever, underneath one of those dashes, you'll know what I'm talking about. That, yeah, it's easy to get up against it with your hand, get little cuts on your hands and your fingers when you're trying to do that. Kind of frustrating. But this is kind of sharp. I have a piece of floss here, and if it cuts the floss, I would consider that something that you should obviously be looking out for. So I'll just kind of, yeah, cuts it really easy. So that just shows you, again, it's hard for me to show you in video how sharp this is. Let me try the other side here. Yeah, it's pretty sharp. But I think you could cut yourself if you hit it hard enough, but if you just brush against it, you just get it irritated because it felt like you cut yourself. But yeah, that's something I did not expect. I thought at least they could, you know, run a little sander on the edges here just to knock that burr off. But anyway, so yeah, not much else to talk about. We can change the orientation of the handle, which I will be doing. The way I want to set this up is going to be with the handle straight up and down. I'm not sure why they ship it this way. This would be how you would mount it if you wanted that feel of when you have your emergency brake down next to the gearbox tunnel in a car. If anybody with a standard sports car that's ever had one of those knows what I'm talking about. And it might be what you want, but yeah, I'm going to want it straight up and down to match my steering wheel when I'm coming off the steering wheel and grab it. Anyway, each his own how you want to do it. Now we do get some cables with this. This is a cable with a little DIN piece here. I think that's 3.5 mil, something like that. And we have a RJ12, I believe, connector on this side. This will plug into either the pedals, V3 pedals, not the V2s, but the V3s, which the V2s are the older ones. For the V2s, they have a different hookup over there. Or you can hook this directly up to your Club Sport or the Elite, any of those wheels, even the DD Podium, DD wheels rather. You can plug it into those. And that's how I'm going to be doing it, because I'm not going to rerun the pedals or anything else. This is the V2 attachment. Again, we have the same little plug out here. And they have a little special plug that will go into the circuit board that's on those V2 units. A little different. And we also have this combo. If you need it's an extra port, you can see you can do a pedal and a handbrake here and go up to your wheel. So you can have this hanging off your steering wheel, and then you'd run your pedal and your handbrake into it. I won't need this either, but this is what comes with your kit. Now, if you want to run this in the PC, a PC only, you will have to pay the PC dongle tax, which is their USB conversion box, and that's $20 plus shipping. So if you just want to run it standalone, it's another 20 bucks. So be advised. Now, there's a lot of ways to mount this thing. In the manual, it shows you a bunch of stuff in here, how to plug things in, which is actually a pretty good, one of the better manuals, I think, showing you how everything should work. And we'll get to the look inside and how we're going to be mounting this. But you have holes both down here, you have them up here, and we have some M6 holes tapped. Not really tapped. You can see those are inserts. See how those are, see the little indentation around there where they weld those on? Or they have some kind of compression technique. But you can see it's, I don't know if you see that in the light, but it has a little bit of a place where it looks like they put a grinder on it before they painted everything. Anyway, M6 holes. You got two in the back, you got one up here, or front, back, however you want to orient it. This is so you can come up underneath a piece of metal or whatever you're mounting this to and just screw it in with M6 screws, of course. Now on the sides is how most people I've seen have been mounting this thing. And it's pretty easy because these holes go all the way through. You can see the daylight in there. You'll still have to take this top off to get an M6 bolt in here. Probably a socket head cap, I would imagine, I would put on here and go into a T-nut, because I'll be mounting this to aluminum profile, and just go through with your wrench, if it's long enough, obviously, and you can go all the way through and tighten it down once you have it back on. Or you can just leave the top off, I would assume. I haven't been in there yet, but I would assume you can just leave the top off and do it without going all the way through. But we'll find out once we get there. So a lot of mounting options. I do like that. You can mount this to the side of their shifter, which is also a good way to mount it. Then you got your shifter and your handbrake together as one unit, which is kind of the way I like to do it. And yeah, we'll go ahead and look at the little sticker on the back there. It shows it's a 1.5 Club Sport. So that's about it for the closer look. That didn't take long, did it? Next, what I'm going to do is go ahead and pull the cover off and see how this thing works. Now let's take the cover off for our look inside segment. This is a very simple thing to do, pretty self-explanatory. We have two screws on top here, and these are obviously some flat head screws, so they sit down in the recesses or the countersunk areas. Now there's a screw back here next to our plug that we plug our electronics into to attach it to our whatever. But this little quality control sticker was on there, covering it up. So I'm not sure why they do that. I'm sure it's not warranty, because you have to take this top off to be able to mount it on the side like that to your shifter and such. So I'm not sure why they did that. But just get a hair dryer or a heat gun if you have one. Just warm that up and it peels right off. And you can see it didn't leave much as far as residue on our screw. Came off pretty cleanly. So of course there's three screws we have to take off. They are 2.5 millimeter hex size. And I believe these are probably from the size of this top here. Yeah. This is a M4, I'm pretty sure, yep. So we've got an M4 screw, very short. And again, there's that little flathead bit there. And it has that gunmetal kind of black color to it that Fanatec uses in a lot of their stuff, which I kind of like. So we get the other top one out here. And these are easy to take out, as they should be. One more in the back. Very easy. Might want to keep a little pressure on the top as you're doing that because it wants to spring up a little bit and put tension on it. So we'll put these guys over here where they can't get away from us. To pull this off, remember we have this little piece in the back here, so you want to make sure you don't catch that in the hole because it kind of sits flush there. So I would just pull the front part off first. Maybe you can just slide it. It really doesn't matter, I guess. I'm going to tilt mine back a little bit first, like this, to clear that plug, like that. There we go. And then come on back off. There we go. All right. So again, just a piece of stamped metal here. And they do the finish all the way inside and out, apparently. Nice. And of course, on the inside here, it looks like they're doing the same thing. And there's our assembly. Not too complicated, but gets the job done. Now they have this urethane, looks like a bumper, like a rubber bumper. And that's not for tension or resistance. That's to, if you, well, this is going to be hard to do, but I guess you can see it down there. When you push this backwards, you can see how that comes back. So it's a silencer, so when it snaps back from the spring pressure in here, keeps it nice and quiet. And there is our spring. It looks like you should be able to, if you could find a spring the same diameter, to get a stiffer spring if you wanted to. I'm sure there's guys that have already done mods like this to this thing. It's easy enough to pull this apart. The spring pressure is not too bad on it. You take this nut off the back and this whole thing will come off, I'm sure. This is a little ball unit here. I can't get it to turn though. It's not that loose, but it's still under a little pressure. So this helps everything swivel. A little socket in there, a little ball socket. And you can see that there's a potentiometer down in there in this metal bracket that they use to contain the potentiometer and contain the other side of the shaft that our lever is rotating on or pivoting on. And that's what I was wondering, because when I first saw this, I saw there was a hole here for a screw, but there's nothing on the other side to support it. So yeah, that's how they're doing it. And we have another piece of stamped steel over here. And of course, that's holding the screws for our top. It also holds the screws for the side attachment here. So it keeps everything right where it should be. So we have 6 screws handling all the pressure of this handbrake, 4 M4s, which should be enough, I would imagine. Not that much pressure on it. So a good design. It looks like it's a, you see that gold spacer down in there? I would not call that. I would not call that rather a bronze bushing. Looks like some kind of gold covered, maybe aluminum bit, maybe even plastic. Hard to tell. This bit is plastic, feels like. Little spacer there. I'm guessing that's probably aluminum. Hard to tell. And yeah, just a potentiometer in there, so it tells us what position the handbrake lever is in when we're pulling on it. Pretty simple. Everything looks pretty solid. Another piece of stamped steel back here, obviously the screws on each side, holding our pin, or rather our plug receiver, so that we can plug our electronics into it. In the lever itself, we take out these 2 bolts here, these 2 black ones, and I believe those are 10 millimeter nylock nuts on the other side of that. And I'll do another segment showing me converting this over to change the angle from straight to straight up, because that's the way I'm going to be running mine. And again, be mindful of this thing, because mine is pretty sharp. I mean, every time I touch it, I kind of notice that. I might even, in fact, I might even take this out to my, when I take it off, I might have to take it out to my belt sander and just smooth it out a little bit. Just attach, you know, just something so I don't run into any problems when I'm moving stuff around. So yeah, pretty simple. Not going to be a very long look inside, is it? Simple, but I believe this is going to be a pretty effective design. And again, this is how we're going to get in and access our bolts. Then when I'm going to attach this to aluminum profile. And again, you can go through this side and tighten it, or you can just go ahead and tighten it down from here and here. With the, you don't have to have it the top on to tighten it down. It doesn't look like to me, unless you want to go down low here, then you would, because it'd be hard to get in between this piece here to access that hole. So then you would want to go through. And the same deal over here. Yeah, it's gonna be hard to get a wrench in there on the bottom ones, but I'm gonna be using the top ones. I think depends on the height and where I need it to be. So yeah, pretty simple stuff here, guys. Yeah, we'll just get to the next segment. Now we're going to change the angle on our handbrake. I want mine to go up straight, like an L shape, if you will. at least as straight as I can get it, is whatever it allows us to do in here. And we'll find that out in a minute. We have to pull our cover off, which is 2 screws here. Those are 2.5 millimeter wrench size heads on these to get them loose. And you got one on the back. Pretty simple. Go ahead and pull those off. And once we have the cover off, we'll have access to the other bits to make this thing work as far as getting it changed around. This is very simple. At least this part is. We'll have to wait till we get inside to see what's going on there. And again, a little flathead M4 screw there. It's that gunmetal gray, or really dark gunmetal gray color Fanatec likes to use. Kind of like the color. And when I take this cover off, I like to kind of tilt it up this way first, although it's trying to pop off in the back. Okay, either way, what I was getting to is I'm trying to tilt it a little bit to clear this plug back here. I want to make sure I don't mess my plug up, right? I'm not scraping it with this thing, even though it may not hurt it. Right, so here's what we have. We've got 2 bolts in here. I got one here, and these are socket head caps. These are 5 millimeter hex size. They have lock washers on them. And on the other side, we have these nuts. These are 10 millimeter nuts. They are Nylock nuts. So they got those plastic inserts in them to help them hold everything down. So we've got a lock washer here and Nylock on these nuts. So Fanatec wants to make sure this doesn't go anywhere, this lever. Of course, when you think about it, there is going to be a lot of leverage on it because we're pulling from up here and all the pressure is down there. So I think they've done their due diligence. And it's connecting to another stainless steel plate here that is also 4 millimeters thick, just like the lever itself. Now, the only thing is, there's a kind of a two-way thing you have to do here to get this loose. These bolts here will come out, and you have to hold those nuts. There's a couple ways to do this, because there's threads in this plate here, not the lever, but there's threads here that are holding that, right? The M6 threads. So there's a couple ways to do this. You can just try to unscrew it, and we're going to do that first. And to do that, there's a couple things we can use here. You can use this, a regular hex L-shaped wrench, but it's kind of tight in here for one of those. See how tight that is? I can get it in there. I can finagle it to slide in there, but I'm not going to be able to back it out much, am I? So I'm not going to use that. I could use one of these, and this comes out of a little Bodness set here. And this is also a 5 millimeter hex wrench that is a short one. You can see a little stubby thing there, and it's got a little ball end on it. Now you can make these yourself if you have an extra hex wrench laying around, and it's the longer ones, maybe not this long, but just giving you an example. You could actually chop one of them off to make it small like that. You don't have to go buy a whole set like this, even though I have one. But I also have a lot of these that I've collected over the years chopped off. Right. But I'm going to use something else, and that's this little guy here, my Mini Ratchet 400. See that? The stainless steel bar here, and it has these cool little bits that have a very tight little groove pattern in there, or tooth pattern. So you don't have to turn this very far to do the ratcheting action. And you just put it in one side for out if you're trying to back something out, or if you're trying to put something in, you put it on the inside. So it's very easy to do. In this case, I want to go out. So I'm going to try to turn one of these without messing with the nut and see what happens. So I'm going to go down here. I have a little close-up view, guys. You can see that. First, we got to break it loose. Let me do that. There we go. So as I'm doing that, it's backing out of the nut. All right? So the nut's kind of just staying there as I'm turning this. And eventually that nut's going to get pretty loose. See if you guys can see that without that handle being in the way. But yeah, eventually it'll back all the way out. Now before I do that, I'm going to go down and get the other one going too. That's usually the way you want to do this kind of thing. You don't want to, and just broke it loose, get one further out than the other, because you can actually get this lever cocked like that to one way or the other, and it'll be impossible for you to get the other one to come out. And going back in, you have the same consideration. And again, I have to be careful what I'm doing here as far as how far I'm going, because of my little wrench here. Yeah, I just barely made it out. But I should be able to get these with my finger here eventually, because the nuts are going to get loose enough for me to do that. The Nylock nuts here, now they're loose enough I could probably, well, not yet, but But I'm just going to go ahead and take pressure off of this lever now with my fingers as I take my fingers and undo these nuts, or rather bolts. And there we go. You saw the nut just fall down and the bolt's coming out. There we go. Here's our bolt. All right, so we're just going to get the top one. Same thing is going to happen. The nut's going to fall down. There it goes. And then I'll get this bolt far enough out of the main plate here that we're bolting to. There we go. Now the lever's coming out. And there's our other bolt. These are pretty tight in these holes too, these bolts are. I thought they were threaded almost at first. Right. So now we can see there's our plate. Let me go ahead and get my washer out of there. Make sure we don't lose everything. Keep it all in one little spot. I'm going to go to the other shot for this. You can see that there are threaded holes in that plate. So that's where all the threading is going on. Besides our nuts obviously going on the other side. But now we have it loose, easy enough. We got our hardware here. We're going to leave it right there, get everything out of the way. And now I'm going to flip this around. And I'm also going to take this back off after I do this because the sharpness on the edges here, I'm just going to hit this with a file or something to get them smoothed out. Because especially when you're working around with stuff like, if you slip and hit that, it'll probably give you a pretty good scratch, I would imagine. Anyway, we can see that when we turn this from this side to this side, or orientation, the angles are changing on that. But they're still going to match our plate down here. See the angles in the plate? So this will go on there just like that, and those angles will line up till we get the bolts in. So let's do that. I'm going to start with the top one first. Remember, we're going to have to get the nuts on too, but let's get a little trick here that makes that a little easier, even though we have very narrow access in between this plate and the side of the casing. I'm going to go ahead and start the first one. I'll go ahead and stop. I guess I'll do to the top first. Go ahead and push it through a little bit, like that. And I'll just line it up. I'm looking straight down, trying to find the hole. I think that's it. And once I get this one started, I'm going to go immediately to the other one. Get a little bit of thread in there. Because I don't want this plate, again, to get skewed to where we're in a bind by tightening one before we do the others. So kind of a sequence here. I'm just turning this with my fingers. And these gloves have good grip on them, so it makes it a little easier to get this done. I'm looking straight down, trying to find my hole there. Let's see, that's not the hole. Maybe that is. I think that's it. Okay. Now I've got the hole. I want to run them in a little bit, enough to make sure that I have plenty of room to get my wrench back in there. And also, now is a good time. See how far I've got they're protruding in there. Now I want to get those nuts back in. So here's a little trick to do that. Trying to do this with your fingers is going to be next to impossible. So what you do is you take your nut. If you have something like this, needle nose pliers, I'm just going to take that nut and stick it in the ends of my needle nose pliers here and just hold it like that. Now it does have a tendency to pivot because we're not flat on the flat parts of that nut because of the angles, right? So it tends to want to wiggle on you a little bit. So I try to grab one side on the flat and have the other piece there. I can't get all the way flat on it, but it kind of holds it just a little bit better from doing the swivel thing on you. All right, so now the idea is to hold this thing down inside of here as I'm turning the bolt and get it started. So that's what we're going to do. We'll go to the close-up, see if I can show you guys what I'm doing here. And I'm going to do the top one first. I'm looking straight down. I can see the bolt coming out of the other side. And I'm going to, well, before I do that, I got to flip this thing around because I'm going in now. I'm going to use this, and hopefully this will help me do this. So back on the nut here. All right, that looks good. And we'll come back in. I'm just going to hold it down in there as I'm looking down up against the end of the bolt. Go ahead and get my wrench in here and start turning it. And hopefully, well, I'll tell you what, let me see if I can do it with my fingers. It's turning so much I can't get the ratchet action on the wrench. There we go. So now the nut is started, right? I got to do the same thing on the bottom one, which in retrospect, thinking about it, I may have wanted to do the bottom one first because I have more clearance looking straight down, but I can cut them in sideways here and do the same thing. So I'm just going to kind of do like this, and hopefully this bolt will turn rather easily. And it is. Enough to get this thing started. There we go. I think that's got it. I can spin it with my finger then. So you just get your finger back in there and spin them a ways, but not all the way, because again, we still have that nylock thing going on, right, on the nut. So it's only going to let us spin it down so far before we hit that plastic insert that's at the nylock, and then we got to stop. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and run these guys in with the ratchet. And because it's turning so easy, I'll just take my finger and stick it on the head of the bolt and hold it there while I'm doing it, so I can still get my ratchet action. Okay, that's tight. Go ahead and get that out and do the other one. It's not real tight yet. I'm going to wait to tighten everything down until I get all these guys kind of snugged up. Okay, now I've got my nuts and I have to run those down. This is where the slow part comes because I'm going to have to take my wrench and just do it like this. Shouldn't be too hard, but I have to get these guys tight, and I might have to hit them again once I do my final tighten on the bolts themselves over here, because they might go in far enough for me to have to do that. Let's see if I make sure I got this one all the way spun down with my finger as far as it'll go. There it goes. So now I'm just going to see if I can get in here and get to this one. Yeah, this is not going to be fast just because it's hard to get to it. Yeah. Patience. You must have patience for this. But fortunately, you're probably not going to do this very many times as far as changing the angle. And I almost wish that they would ship this thing with the angle, you know, straight up, because I think most people are probably going to use it that way, not the straight way. Maybe they ship it that way because of the shipping process. It's easier to ship that box than the other one. Okay, now I'm tight on the nuts. I'm kind of tight. I can still do them a little bit. So now I'm going to come back and hit my bolts and make sure they're good and tight with my little ratchet. This ratchet is worth its weight in gold. See how the nut turned there when I was doing that? Once you get into tight spots like this, this is where this thing pays off, no matter how much you pay for it. So now I know my bolts are very tight in the threaded part of the plate that we're attaching this lever to. But now I'm going to have to go back and make sure that my nuts are good and tight. So they probably came loose a little bit, and they did. So now I'm turning them, trying to get them as tight as I can. I think that'll do. And we'll go down and get the bottom one. And the bottom one's pretty tight already, so that's good. I'm going to hold my lever here as I do that. Yeah, it's good and tight. So you want to make sure you get this puppy tight, right? Because you're going to put a lot of force on this when you're in the heat of battle using your handbrake. So there we have it. Get a little closer look up here. Everything is nice and tight again. And we have our angle. Get these out of the way. Not really straight up and down. I just noticed that, yes. It feels pretty good though. I'll tell you, this, you know, for $130, this has a good feel to it. I'm sure it's going to feel pretty good once we get it solidly mounted to something, if I can, as solidly as I can. And yeah, so I would like to see this come back a little further though. Yeah, maybe like right about there. Not sure why the angle's still forward like that. Anyway, so what we'll go ahead and do is put the, well, I'm going to pull this back off because, like I said, I'm going to file these edges down a little bit. Just something I want to do. They're just too sharp for me to be using around me, and I just want to hit them real quick. We didn't cut anything. So I'll do that, and then I'm going to come back, put it all back together, and then we'll talk about how we're going to end up mounting this puppy. Here is the mounting configuration I'm going to be using for my testing. It's not optimal. I would do something different if this was going to be my daily driver handbrake setup. What I came up with, because of what I have to work with here, and I'm not attaching this to a Fanatec shifter, I put it on some 4080 series here that's used as a shifting platform for this rig. The centers are 40 millimeter, which meant I couldn't get both of these holes, you see them over here, employed over here, because these holes are 50 millimeter centers. It's made again to attach through the Fanatec H-pattern shifter. So we can't use both of these holes down here on the channel. If I was going to mount this permanently, I would fabricate an aluminum plate on the bottom here, and it would hang out maybe an inch or two on each side in the front over here also. I would attach it with the M6 inserts that they have, one back here and two up there in the front. So that's how I would do it. And then put some profiles, short pieces on the top of this with some corner brackets, and then I could bolt this straight down to it with T-nuts and bolts like you normally would. So not the best scenario for the way I have it mounted, but for testing I think it's going to be fine, because, you know, as far as this way, there's not a lot of movement this way when we're using a handbrake. There will be a little bit of movement that way because my shoulder's up here on the seat, and I'll be reaching out at a little bit of an angle to grab it, as you normally would, even on a shifter. Doesn't really matter. You're always kind of coming at an angle, and it depends on where you can mount it. I couldn't mount this on the inside because of my seat bolster here on this Prisma seat is too close here, and it wouldn't fit in between it. So it's fine here. We can adapt it just about anything. And the important thing is to get a good feel for it while I'm testing. Now, there is some flex in this unit, as you would imagine, not the stiffest thing in the world. And you can look down there at that spacer, and you can see when I move this a little bit, there's a little gap there in the spacer. It comes out. Well, you can see that, but anyway. I wasn't expecting it to be super stiff, and the whole thing moves a little bit too because, again, I couldn't employ all the holes that I wanted to. So the casement actually is moving a little bit. I think you might be able to see that. But once I get the top plate back on here and bolt it together, it's going to give it a little bit more structural integrity once that's done. So again, I use some socket head caps on the bottom here. These are M6 T-nuts in the back, of course, and we have one in the front up there, or it wouldn't work very well. And again, I think this is going to be okay. The brake itself feels pretty good. It's got a nice stiff spring in there. So when I'm pulling on it, it has nice tension for me anyway. Of course, that's pretty subjective. But yeah, I like the way it feels. I'm glad they went with a heavy spring like that and not something too light. Now, how it performs once we're driving, we just have to wait and see. I did file down the edges on this shaft, or the lever shaft, with a file just to get those burrs off, because I just wasn't comfortable working around it. And yeah, I just didn't want to get scratched. So anyway, I took just a regular bastard file, or actually a real fine one, and kind of just knocked the edge off. Now you can see that there's actually a forward tilt here to this handle. Not sure why they went with that. I would prefer to have it straight up because that's typically how I would have a handbrake. And then not only that, but we also have a further tilt up here in the handle. But again, that's more aesthetics than anything else, I think. I don't think it's going to affect the performance in any manner. And I do, again, like this foam grip. Not sure about the durability of it as far as long term, but I do like the feel of it. And I like the feel of the pull on this. Like I said before, it's really surprised me how good that this feels, especially at the price point. So what we're going to do is go ahead and put the top back on, obviously, get everything bolted down, make sure everything's nice and secure. Now, I do like the way we have holes on both sides of the casement, because now you can just take your wrench when you need to tighten up your bolts on the other side. It doesn't matter which side it is, and just slide it through that hole. And then we can get it twisted into, if I can, there we go, into the socket head cap, and I can turn that, loosen it, tighten it, obviously. So that's nice that you have access holes in there that also serve as mounting holes. So a good design there, I think, as far as that element's concerned. So now all we have to do is get in the rig, do some driving, and yeah, see what we think. We're in iRacing at Sonoma's Rallycross track in the Ford Fiesta. First thing I noticed about the handbrake is it didn't feel as strong as far as the spring tension goes as it did when I was bench testing it, and even when I was pulling on it when I did the mounting segment of this review. I've made some comments that it felt pretty good, but that changed when I got in the car and started driving it. It felt lighter, and I think that's because we're combining the spring tension now in the angle that I'm reaching out and grabbing the handbrake, which there's always a little bit of angle when we're pulling on a shifter or handbrake when we're sitting in a car, because it's not directly in a straight plane to where our arm is. So I think that's combining to give me that feel where I'd like to see a stiffer spring. And I know there's a lot of modding going on for this handbrake out there in the world, so there's probably somebody out there that's already done that. So I would like to see it a little stiffer. But again, subjective. This is my personal view on the feel of it. Other than that, it gets the job done. As you can see, I'm pretty consistent here. I was able to establish a rhythm, and that's an important thing when you're driving in the dirt, getting a rhythm with your handbrake, knowing exactly how much pressure you need to put on that to get the car to swing around the way you need it to. So yeah, it passed that with no problem, able to set up a good rhythm and got comfortable with it. A little light in the feel, like I said. I'd like to have some more tension to be able to feel that pressure a little better. The hand grip on it, very cushy hand grip. I like this hand grip, but being foam the way it is, I'm just not sure about the long-term durability under a lot of use if you do a lot of rally driving. But yeah, I'm sure there's probably somebody that's found a way to put another grip on there if this one wears out. And yeah, end of the day, it's doing what it's supposed to do. I really can't fault it too much. The only thing I really faulted about was the quality control issue with the sharp burrs that were on the edge of the lever itself. And of course, I was able to file those off. But still, it's something that you would, even at $130, would expect not to see out of the box. But other than that, you can see where the money was spent on this shifter, and you can see why it is at the price point it is, I think. And if you need a full-size control for a handbrake, this is probably something that you should look at. At the end of the day, it just gets it done. And it plugs right into your Fanatec gear too, so you don't have to worry about a USB connection or anything like that for another handbrake if you're concerned with those types of things. Final thoughts on the Fanatec Club Sport Handbrake version 1.5. Out of the box, this handbrake looked and felt as I expected it would at the $130 price point. The body casement is made from stamped steel, as well as the internal support brackets. The finish on the casement halves was better than I expected. The internal mechanical bits are made for the most part from steel. It is a simple yet effective design. The main shaft that the spring is riding on is a solid steel rod. The action is surprisingly good on the bench. Good, heavy spring tension when pulling the lever, and a soft landing on release of the lever provided by the rubber bumper acting as a stop. There is some flex in the mechanism as a whole, but really not any more than I was expecting. I was also not expecting the unfinished sharp burrs that were left on the main lever's edges. Not sure how this got through the quality control guys, but it is sharp enough to cut through some dental floss with ease. I did take the time to file down the edge burrs so I would not have any issues working around it. Also, it will probably end up with another sim racer, so I didn't want them to have to deal with it. The foam handle feels quite good in use. Not certain about long-term durability though. Fanatec has thought of many ways the user may want to mount this handbrake, and has come up with an overall good compromise design with their solution. I didn't have any issues getting it mounted to my cockpit. Driving this handbrake doesn't inspire the driver, but it does get the job done without any complaints. I was able to find a good rhythm with it when driving my rallycross car. The pressure needed to pull the handle was a little bit less than I was hoping for when I was actually testing it on the bench. Still, enough tension for most, I think. Overall, this Club Sport handbrake meets my expectations for one at this price range. Except for the sharp burrs on the lever's edges, it did everything that I needed it to do. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.